scientist. It's pretty much similar to who becomes a doctor, who becomes a fakir, who becomes a lawyer. So somebody who has knowledge about uh, the medical practices, about diseases, he will be qualified to treat someone who is sick. Just like that, someone who is qualified with how the law works, what are the laws, they'll be qualified as advocates. Uh, Somebody who is qualified with understanding Quran, Hadith, and all those knowledge, they'll be qualified as fuqaha or mujaddid or yeah, whatever. So what I mean to say is that even in Islamic tradition, you will have different disciplines and different divisions of knowledge, and each knowledge is very particular and specific. It doesn't mean that you can't have grasp of two knowledge simultaneously. You can actually have, but the only point is you should have the knowledge. If someone who is not knowledgeable on medical practices, if he treats a sick person, we won't call it qualified treatment. Just like that, to understand society, we should have a knowledge. So basically, a social scientist is someone who will be able to cure the diseases of the society, who is a doctor of the society. So while we are doing this exercise of reading Ambedkar, reading Annihilation of Caste, what we are basically doing is this thing. We are trying to master the aspect of sociality so that we can understand the society better. Keeping it as an uh, intro, how can we read Ambedkar? Even when we talk about different scholars, uh, leaders, and all, we'll have different personas of the same person. For example, Ambedkar is an advocate, is a well qualified uh, legal expert. Ambedkar is the uh, leader of depressed classes or leader of uh, many other groups who were on the margins. Ambedkar is a philosopher who philosophized many things. Ambedkar is a political scientist. Ambedkar is a sociologist. So these are different personas through which we can locate Ambedkar. So I can read Ambedkar from a very legal point of view. I can read Ambedkar from a very sociological point of view. It depends on how you read and what persona you read. And of course, the question is, will it be possible to read all these personas together? Ambedkar as a lawyer, sociologist, political scientist, sociologist. Is it possible actually? So that's a question which we have to ponder upon. When we come to the text, what I'm trying to do is to give a larger context of the text and to give a introduction to the text so that you will be able to understand text maybe much better, not because I am a big expert, but just because I had a chance to read it, and I had a chance to read this text along with Professor Satyanarayana, who is one of eminent uh, Ambedkarite scholar. So this text was written in 1936. As you know, it was and it is an undelivered speech. It was supposed to be the presidential address by Dr. Ambedkar to Jatpat Lal, Jatpat Mandal, Jatpat Todak Mandal.
Jat Pat Thoda Mandal.
Jatpat Todak Mandal, yeah. Yes. So they wanted, there were a group of social reformers from the Hindu upper caste. They invited Ambedkar for this presidential speech, but unfortunately, there were disagreements on what all things can Ambedkar actually speak and what all Ambedkar shouldn't. And at the end, they had to cancel the invitation of Ambedkar. And Ambedkar published this speech as a pamphlet, and later he wanted to add it to his own works on caste in India. So this is the particular context of writing or delivering annihilation of caste. And there is a historical context to this speech or writing, whatever you have to call it. It came. Someone is coming from my. Is coming from my earphone, or yeah, okay, all right, yeah. So there is a historical context to annihilation of caste. In 1930s, this whole debate about communal award is happening. Whether communal award should be given to Muslims and Dalits, or only to Muslims, or only to Dalits, only to depressed classes. So this was an intense debate in the 30s, and engaged within this debate. There is a context in which Pune Pact is being signed between Gandhi and Ambedkar. Ambedkar wanted to get communal award from British, just like it is granted to Muslims. So what is the basis of this communal award? Muslims argued for communal award, saying that they are different. That is the first aspect. The difference is the first aspect to claim communal award. Second is the kind of oppression or discrimination which they may face in authoritarian context. These are the two main points on which a political reservation kind of thing was argued for. Ambedkar also argued for the same thing. He said that depressed classes are a separate entity. They are not part of Hinduism. They are different. They are outside Hindu fold. He has a work called Outside the Fold. The fold is actually the Hindu fold. So his was to understand depressed classes as a separate class, completely different from Hindus. In other words, Ambedkar conceptualized depressed classes as a different socio-political and religious entity, different from Hindus. And this was so problematic for Hindu social reformers, the so-called social reformers, mostly for Gandhi, who thought that only untouchability is the issue, and when we get rid of untouchability, all Hindus can come together. So this was the whole point of debate between, one of the main point of debate between Gandhi and Ambedkar. So unfortunately, Gandhi goes for his satyagraha, not to get rid of British from India, but to get rid of the claim of Ambedkar that Dalits should be given communal award and Dalits are separate entity. At the end, Ambedkar had to succumb to the demands of Gandhi because Gandhi threatened with his life, and Ambedkar had to make a compromise, and that compromise is one of the most drastic thing ever happened in Indian history, in the modern Indian history. And that compromise is still having its effects in understanding caste, religion, and community. When it comes to reservation, also still why Muslims are not given reservation just like Dalits are given. It's all the debate goes back to this Pune Pact in 1932. So that is one of the context, historical context of annihilation of caste. It is after this failure of Ambedkar's project of differentiating depressed classes from Hindus, politically differentiating depressed classes. Second historical context of this speech is that Ambedkar, after returning from abroad, he has been trying to make a lot of movements, anti-caste movements, in smaller or bigger manners. And he was like, nothing is going to happen within Hinduism. And the social reform is impossible within Hinduism. So in 1935, he declares that I was born a Hindu, but I will not die a Hindu. So this is the historic declaration which Ambedkar made in 1935, that he will not die as a Hindu. So this is the context in 1936. This particular speech is being delivered. So what we have to remember while reading Annihilation of Caste, this is the historical context. And second thing is, this speech is supposed to be delivered at a conference by Jat Path Thodak Mandal, which is an upper caste Hindu organization. It is not intended for the general public. It was not intended for other communities, but it was specifically so within that text have that inner meaning, many connotations directly goes to attack the upper caste consciousness of Hindus. However, even though it is a speech supposed to be delivered for an upper caste audience, what is the relevance of this speech for us to read it? It might be, as Ambedkar says in the preface of his third edition for Annihilation of Caste, he says that he wanted to incorporate annihilation of caste into castes in India, his genesis and mechanisms. In other words, there is something which the general audience can take from Ambedkar's understanding of caste from Annihilation of Caste. Or if we want to understand casteism, which is the social reality in India, which is the sociality of India, which is the very core basic sociality of India. If we want to disentangle the caste, we have to read Annihilation of Caste. And as Ambedkar himself says, he wanted to incorporate it as part of genesis of caste. I thought that I will talk a bit about castes in India, the other work of Ambedkar, which was published in 1917 when he was finishing his graduation. So maybe by giving an intro to caste in India, it might be better and easier to grasp what is there in annihilation of caste. So in caste in India, Ambedkar tries to review different arguments by different Western scholars about what is caste, what are the characteristics of caste, and he finds that some of the Western scholars have talked about different characteristics that, like, the idea of pollution is the characteristics of caste. Some said that exclusiveness or closedness is the characteristics of caste. But Ambedkar is not completely taking all these elements. Rather, he's saying definitely there is idea of pollution within caste, but that is not because idea of pollution will be there in a lot of other circumstances, and also that idea of pollution largely comes within a religious fervor. So when caste attains a religious fervor, idea of pollution has a meaning to understand caste. Otherwise, idea of pollution is not the characteristics to understand caste. Secondly, he is saying uh, some scholars said that exclusiveness or closedness of different castes are the characteristics, and he is saying uh, it is a result of the caste, and it is not why caste has originated. And what he finds okay to describe the genesis of caste is endogamy. And he says that endogamy is the essence of caste. He analyzes different uh, contexts in which endogamy was the, and he talks about the idea of surplus man and surplus woman. So if the closed
So I
caste
have
is an endogamous caste, yes.
just sorry for interruption, but previously the audience have already read about the genesis of caste.
Oh,
So
okay,
they have basic because previously we were having these lectures. At the
okay,
same time, we have given them the assignment to read about this genesis of caste.
okay, okay.
So officially, it is understood that they have read it because for the past three lectures, the lecture was backed by the assignment reading of genesis of
All right,
caste.
that's great. That's great. Then I think I may not have to talk about castes in India in detail. So, yeah, I will just brief some points which I want to stress, which is there in castes in India, instead of detailing what is there in castes in India. Uh, so this endogamy is one thing which Ambedkar stresses, and the closedness of caste as an enclosed class. That is the other thing which uh, Ambedkar talks about. So these are the two major things which is important for Ambedkar, uh, and his own idea about how caste got spread, and how the mechanism of being psychological and mechanistic aspects of the spread of casteism. Uh, then uh, uh, there I want to talk about something about the psychological aspect and the mechanistic aspect he talks about. So he says that caste as a closed group was started with Brahmins, but that doesn't mean that they were able to spread it everywhere. So he says that there was a psychological character of imitating, and there is a mechanistic character where one sees that one found that doors are closed against them. So on one hand, there are some specific groups who close their own doors, and the other hand, there are this group which says that they the doors are closed against them. Here, two things are there. One, Professor Gopal Guru talks about folded hands. Uh, it's the same idea of uh, closing the doors. So Brahmins always close their doors so that no one can enter. So they always have this closed, folded fist, closed fist. They are not open. Gopal Guru says that nothing enters inside, nothing goes outside. On the other hand, Dalits are having open fist, unfolded fist. So they are more open to different ideas, and they are more on take. That is was something Professor Gopal Guru says. And in the same debate between Gopal Guru and Professor Sarukai, there is an interesting thing. Who is an untouchable? So for Ambedkar, untouchable might be someone for whom doors are closed against them. Ambedkar, in his own autobiographical note, that short note, that which is waiting for my visa, he talks about this aspect, on how he finds himself closed in front of the barber. So the barber initially, they were ready to cut the hair of the cows and buffaloes, but they were not ready to cut the hair of Ambedkar. So that is how he finds the doors closed in front of him, and he is waiting for his visa to enter inside. So that is how the for Ambedkar, untouchable always finds the door closed in front of him. But Professor Sarukai gives another interesting twist to this debate. He says that what is actually an untouchable? Does it mean that it is touch unable, which means you will not be able to touch? For example, sun or fire. You will not be able to touch sun. You will not be able to touch fire. So that is unable to touch, or touch unable. So is that untouchable? Does that mean that that entity is something which you can't touch, just like this, or something else? So what is actually untouchable? And Ambedkar says that it is actually the Brahmin who is untouchable, which means no other caste can touch the Brahmins. And if we touch, it is the Brahmin who is getting polluted. So it is the Brahmin's untouchability that is being transferred to the real untouchable in the world. I think you will get that debate if you read this Cracked Mirror, or this debate between Phenomenology of Caste of Gopal Guru and Archaeology of Caste by Professor Sarukai. And along with that, there is other aspects which Ambedkar talks about in Annihilation of Caste as well. It is the difference between race and caste, or slavery and casteism. What might be the important difference between slavery and casteism? I mean, it says many Western scholars has tried to interpret casteism through the lens of color, but when you see the social reality in India, you will have a brown Brahmin. In the Tamil Brahmins, the Tam Brahmins, they're supposed to be very superior even among the Brahmins, but they are largely brown or black. So the color is not an aspect of superiority in India or for casteism. The second thing about slavery and casteism is that in slavery, you still have, even if it is in whatever limited sense, freedom of thought, liberty of thought you are having. But when it comes to caste, you don't have this liberty of thought. You are closed within, and you can't think beyond the walls. In other words, if the black Negro is taught about, or is given, if he is given an opportunity, he will run away and get his freedom. But even if the lower caste in India is given an opportunity, even if they are given an opportunity to run away, they will not run away because they are molded in it. That is why this mechanistic element within caste is very important in that aspect, psychological and mechanistic aspect, which Ambedkar talks. So coming back to annihilation of caste, um, you will see that in the very beginning of the book, you have a conversation between uh, the organizers of this Jat Pat Todak Mandal and Ambedkar. And what is the main point of debate? The main point of debate is religion. Uh, so these social reformers of Jatpat Todak Mandal, they want to reform Hinduism. They want to get rid of untouchability. They want to get rid of other social inequality. I mean, other social issues just like widow marriage issue, child marriage issue, and all. So these things are there pretty much with them. But what Ambedkar wants, for Ambedkar, you can't get rid of caste without destroying the religion. So, I mean, Hindu religion. So that's one of the major point of difference between the organizers and Ambedkar. And the first section of the book actually deals with this debate between Ambedkar and organizers, and how Ambedkar uh, even printed 1,000 copies of the speech, which has to be distributed in that conference, but nothing of that sort happened. The other issue which Ambedkar points why his uh, uh, presidential address was cancelled is that it is his presence at Sikh Prajar conference. That's something interesting for me. Even though the organizers are talking about some technical issues or the ideological issues, Ambedkar says that uh, even though you are arguing all that things, I believe that the is my presence at Sikh Prajar conference is your actual problem. In other words, the Hindu social reformers are also afraid that Ambedkar's presence and Ambedkar's talks might give an impression for the lower caste people to convert to Sikhism because he is immediately coming from the Sikh Prajar conference. So that was one of the basic fear for cancelling this talk. Then the major point of debate running throughout the text is about social reform. Also because it is organized by social reformers within Hinduism. So the whole text is filled with different debates about social reform. And in the initial uh, pages, he talks about the difference, the problem with political reform and socialist, the social reform which is imagined by political reformers and socialists. So what Congress has done, he describes that Congress has sidelined the issue of social reform and that talks about political reform. This is something important when we talks about the whole nationalist movement itself, because for nationalist movement, it is always the political which is important. We on the political front, you have British, so you have this anti-colonial kind of essence to unite everyone. But when it comes to the social aspects, you will have different caste inequalities, so you can't find a common thread to hang on, a common rope to hang on, so you will disseminate so easily. So what they thought is, even Gandhi many times says that first let us get rid of British, then let us come to our internal issue matters. First let us get rid of the external colonizers. But for Ambedkar, uh, uh, colonialism is not only of the British. It is not, there is a external colonial forces of British, and there is an internal colonialism by Brahmins or the upper caste. So that is the other point of difference between the Indian national movement and Ambedkar. Which social reform or political reform which has to be given preference. And even when they talk about social reform, what is social reform? In our own civic textbooks or history textbooks, we'll have a chapter or a section on social reformers, and immediately we comes to Raja Ram Mohan Roy and all. And what is the social reform which they talks about? That talks about child marriage, widow remarriage. This is one of the key social reform which we are being taught. But for Ambedkar, this is family reform. This is not social reform. For Ambedkar, social reform is annihilation of caste. So this is the major aspect. And social reformers within International Congress are mixing family reform with social reform. And this is an interesting aspect. How the problems of upper caste Hindus becomes the problems of the general, supposed to be the general problems of general mass, or the problem of Indian social order. Because this widow remarriage, which was not a much bigger issue for lower caste or the non-Hindus. It was very specific, the Sadi system, it was very specific to upper caste Hindus and those who followed the Hindu order. For others, it was not an issue. But when it comes to social reform, this upper caste family reform is always counted as the social reform. And that is a problem which Ambedkar talks about in this text. And the other aspect with International Congress is they are not giving space at all for social reform, and they just talks about political reform. It is here this idea of our modernity by Professor Pata Chatterjee also gets importance, because Chatterjee talks how our own anti-colonial movement has brought us into a specific issue where we have tried to keep the social or the religious or the spiritual as untouched, while we always project the anti-colonial element or the political element. So he gives this analogy of a Indian bourgeoisie in early 20th century, where when he goes out of his home, he may wear a Western outfit, a Western dress. But when he comes back to his home, he will wear whatever is being prescribed by the religion or social order. So this is the specific issue of Indian modernity itself. The internal, the inner, the spiritual, the social is untouched, while only the political is supposed to be debated. But for Ambedkar, it is the social which has to be debated. It is not the political. It is not only the political, but social attains prime importance. And because of the same aspect, he even praises Arabs and Prophet Muhammad for bringing social reform before political reform. And he says that it is because the social reform happened prior to the political reform, Arabs could become one entity, or there is a consciousness of a kind between Arabs.
Tahir,
Yeah.
I request you to have more clarity, give more clarity on this, because the social reform should precede the political reform. The whole debate is of this only in the few pages of the book, and the kind of statement that is being given by Ambedkar regarding the Prophet Muhammad Sallam. Can you elaborate it more with the Indian context? What is happening right now in India?
Okay, maybe I will come to that towards the end. Is that fine? because I'm coming to that
Okay,
particular
okay,
aspect
okay then, no problem.
and Muslims. Okay. Uh, so so this aspect of social is running throughout the career of Ambedkar. Uh, uh, he praises Prophet Muhammad regarding the same thing, and it extended uh, the same thing when he was delivering the constitution. He says India is entering into a what was India is entering into a time of conflict where you will have political equality on one side and you will have social inequality on the other side. So for Ambedkar, this tension between political and social was running throughout his career, not only in this text, even before the text, during the text, and after the text. This conflict between social reform and political reform was running throughout his career. And that is why, even after framing the constitution, he finds we haven't still removed the inequalities in the social sphere. And his second critique is towards the socialists. The first one was for the International Congress, the political reformist kind of argument, and second one was for the socialist critique. For socialists, the economic reform precedes other reforms. It is the very Marxist model where you will have the economic base. So for if you have an economic base, you have to change the economic base to change the superstructure, or to change all other aspects within the society. But for Ambedkar, it is not just like that. He says it is Ambedkar is kind of a Gramscian, I would say, in this sense. Uh, it is like for Ambedkar says that a fakir or sadhu or Mahatma will have is more powerful, even though they are not having any penny or any money at all. So it is not the economic capital which gives you power, in at least in the Indian context. Therefore, the socialist argument about economic reform prior to social reform is not helpful for Indian context. That is what Ambedkar is saying. And in the same part, he says that why fakirs or sadhus or mahatmas are getting powerful. It is because religious power is important. They are holding a religious power. A Madadi, a Swami or priest in Udupi Madam or the Tamil temples will have much more power among all the Hindu society than for a capitalist. So this is the specific aspect about religion as a source of power, which Ambedkar is talking about. So as social is the source of power, religion is the source of power, these two has to be reformed. Then only for Ambedkar, we can imagine equal society. And he actually critiques the same argument, the argument about, we'll talk about social issues after the economic revolution. That is usually what is being said. While the political reformists say that once the British goes, we'll talk about our internal issues. The socialists will say that we'll have the economic revolution first, then we'll settle our internal matters. But for Ambedkar, such kind of one after the other kind of thing will not work, because for him caste is the monster and you have to kill the monster. Uh, and he says in a very emphatic tone, Hindu society is a myth. He says that Hindu is a foreign name which is ascribed by Muhammadans who came from outside. And he says that why Hindu society is a myth? Because there is no feeling to other caste. In the caste in India, you might have read that he says caste exists in plural, not in singular. It is always castes, and S is always there. Otherwise, caste doesn't have any meaning in singular. It is only when castes, the in plural comes, there is a meaning. Then only you will have someone who is down or above your social position. That is how the casteism having castes gets a meaning. So here Ambedkar says that caste has no feeling to the other caste unless there is a Hindu Muslim riot. So when Hindu Muslim riot happens, they will come together as Hindus. Otherwise, there is no feeling at all. He says there is a lack of consciousness of a kind. And the only consciousness which is there with Hindus is the caste consciousness, not the consciousness of being Hindu. That is why he is saying that Hindu society is a myth, and it is a collection of warring groups of different castes. This might be a triggering point for us to intervene in the Hindu social order in India. If there is no consciousness of a kind between different castes among Hinduism, I think we can try to figure out how to delve deep into this Hindu social order. For the same reason, Ambedkar says Hinduism is non-missionary. In other ways, no one can convert to Hinduism, but only gets purified, the Shuddhi. He says conversion is impossible because it is closed. And he even says that even the whole process of Shuddhi is impossible within Hindu society. On the other hand, he praises, he gives comparative analysis about Muslims. Again, remember, this is a speech supposed to be delivered to a upper caste Hindu social reformers. So he's trying to reflect on or give a comparative aspect about other communities, Sikhs and Muslims. And he says that you look at them, they're much better than you people. And why can't a lower caste should get converted? This is the basic kind of trigger he is trying to make among this Hindu upper caste, a trigger, a fear of conversion. And he says that if a Muslim from southern India gets attacked, the Muslim from the North India might respond. That is the idea of fraternity, the bye-bye relation between Muslims, he says. Same thing he talks about Sikhs also, which is not there in Hinduism. And he says Hinduism exists only because there are penal laws are there. And that is how he brings the Smridis, Shastras, and Manu, and Chaturvarnya system. And he says it is the Chaturvarnya is the base of Hindu social order. Shastras is the base. And this is the same debate which he is having with Gandhi. Towards the end of this book, you will see a conversation between Gandhi and Ambedkar, and in which one of the basic issue of debate is whether to reform Hinduism, you have to get rid of Hinduism or not. To kill the monster of caste, whether you have to destroy Hinduism or not. This is one of the major point of debate. For Ambedkar, without destroying Shastras, without destroying Hinduism, it will be impossible to annihilate caste. But for Ambedkar, Varna and Jati are different. Gandhi describes Chaturvarnya in a complex term. He says Varna is divine. So people will have to have different varnas, and even the division of people into different varnas is for having a better social order. And Gandhi even says that the son of a cobbler will be better in repairing the chapel, but a son of other profession having another profession will be better in that profession. So it actually facilitates social mobility. That's what Gandhi's argument is. But for Ambedkar, Varna and Jati are not different. That is one and same. So Gandhi is okay with removing untouchability, and he thinks that Hinduism can be reformed so that untouchability can be removed, but they can remain within the Varna system. But for Ambedkar, uh, for caste has to be annihilated, even the Varna system has to get rid of, because the essence of casteism lies in the Shastras. The essence of casteism lies in the Hindu religion. So without destroying Hindu religion, it is impossible to kill the monster of caste. And it is also because of the same thing, a Hindu can't be rational, he says, because they always has to think within the boundaries. They can't think freely. The liberty of thought is not available for uh, Hindus. And he says his problem with Hinduism is it has it is just a set of rules and regulations, or law has changed into religion, or religion and law is not inseparable, but they're just one and same. Law is just called as religion. That is what happened with Hinduism, and that is his other problem with uh, Hinduism. So, in short, what is Dalit
Hello,
and caste?
Farhat, sorry for the interruption. But can you repeat the debate between Gandhi and Ambedkar on annihilation of caste and the abandoning of Hinduism? Can you repeat that once again?
To put it in very simple terms, for
Can you
Ambedkar,
repeat the
repeat the.
can you repeat the discussion between Gandhi and Ambedkar, which you just pointed out?
Yeah, yeah. Towards the end of this same text, you will see that conversation between Gandhi and Ambedkar, and in that conversation, we'll get to know that the very basic debate is the difference between the mode of annihilating caste. For Gandhi, untouchability has to be removed. Untouchability is a problem. For Ambedkar, untouchability has to be removed. So there is no debate about that. But for Gandhi, to remove untouchability, you don't have to get rid of Hinduism. Within Hinduism, you can have reform, and you can keep a Varna system within yourself. You just have to get rid of the Jati system. But for Ambedkar, Varna and Jati are one and same, and it is actually the Varna which has a prescription with Shastras is the essence of casteism. So if you want to get rid of untouchability, you have to get rid of casteism. If you have to get rid of casteism, you have to get rid of Hindu religion, the Shastras. So this is the point of debate between Gandhi and Ambedkar, whether you have to get rid of Hinduism or not. And this is the same debate which happened during the Pune Pact, whether Dalits are within the fold of Hinduism or not. For Ambedkar, they were not within the fold. That is why he demanded separate electorate and communal award for Dalits as well. So, in short, it is the annihilation of caste is about expressing an ethics. If it's a search for ethics, can there be an ethics which Hindus can follow? It is not a question for all the people in general, but whether Hindus can have an ethics. And within the text, he have a positive conception of freedom, freedom to reason, thinking without fear of domination. And this idea of liberty and freedom is something different from the Western conception of the Western liberal conception of freedom. Even though there is a fascination, which you can see in this text also, there is a fascination of Ambedkar for the Western concepts and aspects. His own idea of liberty is something different. In in the castes in India, you might have already seen that Ambedkar says the difference between seeing individual as as individuals constituting society. There is a problem with the conception of individuals as constituting the society, and Ambedkar says it is not the individuals, but it is the classes which constitute society. An individual is a member of the class. Individual is a member of the class, and classes constitute the society. And taking that step ahead here, for Ambedkar, liberty is not the liberty of the individual, but rather it is the liberty of others, the liberty of the left behind, the liberty of the margins. So that is what is important in Ambedkar's conception of liberty. So this freedom is different from Enlightenment conception of freedom, because it is not prohibitions, but an autonomy to think about justice and sovereignty. This is the kind of liberty which Ambedkar talks about. And certainly because of the same thing, Ambedkar is not only focusing on constitutional or legal norms, rather he is also trying to invoke a moral ontology of reform, or a social, he is trying to invoke the aspect of social reform, which even when he is submitting the constitution, he makes the same claim. In other words, the idea of the aspect of moral, the social, is something different, or something yet to achieve. Yeah, so now I think we can go a bit about, I think this is the larger summary of the text. And now I will just brief about some debates between Ambedkar and Islam. And let us wind up there. So there are three.
I think, Tahir, I think we should open for some discussion or questions of what you have said. Then we will move on to the second part of your lecture, if it is feasible to you.
No,
Then
the second part I will end within 5 minutes. Yeah, that's it.
okay, then no problem.
So the three major figures who actually determined the future India, and they are definitely Gandhi, Ambedkar, and Jinnah. And there are a lot of similarities and dissimilarities between these three figures. Gandhi was an advocate, Ambedkar was an advocate by profession, by studies, and Jinnah was also an advocate. And the other interesting aspect is that all these three people are graduates from abroad. Gandhi went to South Africa, Ambedkar and Jinnah went to USA. So all these three people are graduates from abroad. Professor M.T. Ansari makes this interesting observation. He says, Gandhi, Ambedkar and Jinnah went to abroad, and Gandhi came back as half naked. The half naked fakir. Ambedkar came back with cotton suit, but Jinnah came back as he went. In other words, this is the three different approaches to Western modernity which is available. Yeah, I think you have to mute yourself. Yeah, so these are the three different approaches to.
Kindly repeat that observation, because there was disturbance back.
Yeah, Gandhi came back from abroad as half-naked fakir. Ambedkar came back with cotton suit. Jinnah came back as he was. I mean, Jinnah had this cap, this long kurta and all, and he came back as he went. In other words, this is the three different approaches to Western modernity and the kind of liberal ideas which is there. That's a different debate altogether. I was just mentioning what Professor M.T. was talking. So in any way, these three figures are different debates between them. And certainly Islam was one of the point of debate. However, what was Islam for Ambedkar? And what was the difference of treating Islam from Hinduism, if at all any? So for Ambedkar, if you want to kill casteism within Hinduism, you have to destroy Hinduism, the religion. But within Islam, if you want to remove untouchability and casteism, you can go back to the text, you can go back to the religion and destroy casteism. You don't have to destroy the religion to annihilate the caste. That is one of the difference between Hinduism and Islam. In other words, at least in principle, you don't have uh, caste practices. And while talking about caste practices within Muslims, Ambedkar says this thing: caste-like practices. Of course, there are caste-like practices within Muslim community as well. One of the solution and the problem he says is it is due to the incomplete conversion of Muslim. The caste system is still there. This is from thoughts of Pakistan, the partition of Pakistan.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is from that book. And other aspect is that, so the solution is Muslimization of the convert, the complete Muslimization of the convert. So for Hinduism, the complete Hinduization will actually lead to increasing the caste system. Rather, when it comes to Islam, Muslimization actually helps to get rid of casteism. This is one of the positive aspects which Ambedkar talks about Islam. In the same way, he sees the aspect of social reform. On the one hand, there is a paradox actually. Ambedkar, when it comes to Islam, I would say that Ambedkar is a man of paradox. On the one hand, he is very much praiseworthy about the social reform within Muslims. On the other hand, he is very much critical about the lack of social reform among Muslims. He brutally criticizes Parda system, caste system, and a lot of the so-called irrational practices which is existing among Muslim community. There is a brutal rejection on criticism. At the same time, the difficulty to understand the paradox between Ambedkar and Islam is this. One, there is a limited material available about the conversation between Ambedkar and Islam. The only book which details something is this Thoughts on Pakistan. At the same time, the book is an exploration of the political context of the time, and it was written in a much communalized environment, and certainly it is a political analysis rather than any kind of religious or theological analysis. So in other words, a religious or theological analysis of Islam is absent in Ambedkar, and certainly that is why we can't have a much further debate on what was Islam for Ambedkar. Yeah, I think I will stop there and we can have a discussion.
Sir, I need a clarification from you.
Yeah.
One small doubt.
Yes.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are.
So while you were talking, you had said that Ambedkar stated that you can't destroy caste without destroying religion. So doesn't this contradict with his claim in caste in India, where we understand or we can interpret that caste is more than mere belief? Even in the idea of pollution, if I may quote, where he says that consequently, its necessary connection with caste may be completely denied without damaging the working of caste. He's talking about the idea of pollution here. So, can you please enlighten this?
Yeah. In the caste in India, he actually says that it is not the genesis of caste. I mean, the idea of pollution is not the genesis of caste, but rather when caste attains a religious fervor, the idea of pollution becomes important. So he's not denying the religious fervor of caste. Rather, he's saying the idea of pollution attains importance when the religious fervor of caste comes into importance. Do you
At the
get the
same
difference?
time, yeah, at the
Yeah.
same time, he uses the word sanction, exclusion sanctioned by religion. He a caste is like an exclusion sanctioned by the religion or backed by the religious doctrines and notions. So, in the latter part of the annihilation of caste, he discusses in that way. Yeah, all these exclusionary activities, although this kind of exclusion may be in another community, like in the racial practices or racial differences, but the caste-based exclusion is backed by the religious doctrines and religious ideas. So the very genesis of these exclusionary practices is not the ignorance, but the religious doctrine itself. So in that way, he communicates the thing. Tahir, am I correct?
Yes, definitely. And
Yes,
I
okay.
think the contradiction I find from caste in India and annihilation of caste is not on this aspect, but rather when he talks about Manusmriti, Manu in annihilation of caste and caste in India. In caste in India, he says that you can't say that Manu alone was uh, responsible, or he was not that powerful to implement the caste laws within all Indian subcontinent. And he says that if Manu was that powerful, he might be a tyrant. Uh, but rather, when it comes to annihilation of caste, is going back to Manusmriti as a law and law as religion, which is the problem of Hinduism, which is the reason for the caste. So I think on that aspect, there is, of course, there is a kind of contradiction is there, I think.
Yeah. There is another question. Hello, Tahir. Hello.
Yes, I can hear.
Yeah, just I will read it out. We are going to face such caste conflicts in the upcoming future, as he mentions that the origin of caste will continue for years to come. Are there going to be more genesis regarding this conflict as
Are there going to be more?
well? I don't think so. Let me see. We are open for the question answers. Please place your questions.
क्या करो फिर
Abdul
करो
Rahim,
करो गए वे
Can I? Hello.
please raise your hand if there are more than one. Abdul Rahim, first we will go with you. Please unmute yourself and ask the question.
Yes,
You're not audible.
Adil, just ask.
I don't have any doubt regarding this. I will ask later.
Okay then.
Yeah. Assalamu alaikum, Ghayas and Tahir and everybody. I hope I am audible.
Yes.
Yeah. So I've been keenly listening to Tahir's exposition of annihilation of caste, and I have also, I mean, like some things have been troubling my mind in the recent days as well. So I guess there are three things that we are dealing with here. One, I mean, the caste problem and our engagement with it, or the way we are seeing it, and we're trying to grapple it. The caste problem, we are seeing it in three, you say, boxes, let's say. So one is that the caste in the Hindu society, you know, and how the Hindu society treats caste and how it wants to reform, or whatever it wants to do, and in the domain of Hindu ethics or Hindu metaphysics or whatever. So there is the caste problem within the Hindu community. That is one thing. And the other thing is, how do Muslims deal with this caste issue? I mean, how do we approach? And the third is that how are Dalit movements approaching this problem, or even how is Ambedkar exactly approaching this problem? So, I mean, Ambedkar's approach and Dalit movement's approach mostly is very much within the liberal secular worldview, and for them, caste is a very material problem. I mean, they do not talk about a larger metaphysical issues. I mean, they just want to solve the material issue of caste. I mean, even if you say untouchability is a worldly problem. You know, so how do you solve that untouchability and the economic issue? Those are the only two things they are grappling with, and more or less they are mostly into the liberal framework only when they talk about it. Even when Ambedkar adopts Buddhism, it's not the Buddhist metaphysics, I would say, which is making him adopt that religion, or let's say whatever religion he's obtained. It's not the larger worldview of what the religion is presenting that is pushing him towards it. Or so I mean, it's not I mean, it's not a I'm not denying that caste problem is a big issue or not. I'm just saying that when we try to understand and how they are working with that problem. So there is one more thing that I have been trying to understand. That is, now there is a proper worldly problems you have. Let's say the caste issue for Hindu society. Let's replace that with people who say there's patriarchy in Islam. You oppress women. So when you deal with oppression of women, how do you deal with it? And when the Jat Path Todak Mandal is dealing with caste, how is it dealing with that? They want to retain their own metaphysics or whatever their ethics and worldviews, and within that they want to solve this issue of untouchability and economic injustice, all these unjust
Please
issues.
conclude.
Okay,
Please
I
conclude.
guess. So there's one thing I like. There is worldly problems, material issues, and social issues, and then how do you solve it? Like, you solve within your own metaphysics, or you go for another metaphysics, or you completely deny any thing beyond materiality. I guess that is how I see this whole discussion. Any comment is appreciated, and I'll take note of it. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers. I would like to add one more approach. As Adil has mentioned about all the three approaches, one more approach is like how the modern Brahminical society deals with this, and how they are trying to respond to the Ambedkar issues, and in the current scenario, how they are dealing, how they are trying to answer all these issues, and how they are what I can say, how they are engaging with this issue. That also I wanted to know from you guys.
Okay. Actually, there are quite a lot of things which is coming in these questions, and personally I might not be uh, about everything, but I will just make whatever remarks I think I should make. Uh, there is this book by so there is this book by um, Radical. Just a second. Give me a second. Yeah. So there's this book by Aishwarya Kumar, which is called Radical Equality, and he actually makes interesting observations about Ambedkar's philosophy. And one of his basic contention is that just like Ambedkar argued, his ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity is not coming from French Enlightenment or French Revolution, rather from Buddhist ideals of Karuna, Maitri, and something more. In other words, the aspect of modernity within Ambedkar is again a bit complex. It is not that simple, I would say. On the one hand, there is a exception of modernity. There is an embrace of modernity. At the same time, it is not an uncritical embrace of the embrace of modernity. Rather, there are quite a lot of pitfalls he is figuring it out, and he is trying to bring something from Buddhism when he talks about these issues. Even when talking about the issue of caste, the very moment he is going beyond the idea of economic, because his whole critique of socialists is that they are focusing only on economic aspect. So he's going beyond the aspect of economic, and when it comes to even comes to the social issues, he is not simply taking uncritically taking the liberal ideas. Rather, when it comes to the path to salvation, which is one of the later books by Ambedkar, he clearly says about the aspect of spirituality as well. He even says that spirituality not even as a emancipatory kind of thing, but even as a personal kind of emancipation, a very, very personal necessity also. In that sense, at least towards the end, after he understands or he sees even the constitutional reform is not enough to emancipate Dalits, he goes to non-constitutional ways, which is one of the ways is conversion. We have to remember that while conversion was happening, Ambedkar's Nagpur conversion was happening, reservations were not granted to Buddhists, and he converts with lakhs of followers from a reservation kind of safeguard towards a religious kind of safeguard, even though he intends that reservation can be brought later. Here you can see there is a simultaneous struggle of Ambedkar along Ambedkar in the spiritual domain and in the socio-political domain. That is one way I would approach such question. And with respect to modern Brahmanic society, how they are functioning and all, actually, I'm not equipped to talk about that because I haven't studied about any Brahmanical communities in the contemporary. Maybe someone who has any knowledge can elaborate it here. Yeah, and the other aspect about how Dalit movements see caste today and how Muslims approach caste. There are different Dalit movements and there are different approaches within Dalit movements. As Adil was saying, many movements see caste as a material issue, but even Ambedkar doesn't see caste simply as a material issue, but rather a spiritual issue as well. And there are Dalit movements also who will exonerate people to convert. And there are Buddhist Dalit movements who says Buddhism is the only solution to get rid of casteism. In other words, and they are, even though they claim they are Navayana Buddhist and all, the practices which they follow, even the practice Ambedkar followed during conversion by wearing the robe, what was happening? So to bring back to the other argument, Ambedkar went abroad and came back in cotton suit, but towards the end, he changes his attire to the Buddhist robe. So what does it signify? It is not about the rationality, which can say that robe is something rational, or even the rituals which Ambedkar undergoes during conversion. He brings one major prominent Buddhist monks for mediating the conversion process. He even goes to the Buddhist conversion across the world in his last 3 years. So in other words, even though he claims his Buddhism is something different, it is not that different, I would say. And the practices are not rational in the modern sense of liberal rational. Yeah.
So just another question to conclude the discussion, because all of our audience are Muslims and the speaker is also Muslim. As a community from this of this side, what we can do, what could be our role in this activism, or rather in the scholarship, in the caste problem itself, what we can contribute?
Two things I would say. One, to reflect on ourselves. Are the caste mentality in ourselves? Within me, is there a caste mentality? So you can always go back to Quran and Hadith to resolve it. In caste in India, Ambedkar says endogamy is the key of casteism. But there is a hadith in which Prophet says, for 4 things you can go for marriage, but give preference to religion. So, in other ways, this bond of lineage is not important as much as the bond of religion. In that Quranic ayat, Ya ayyuhan nas inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa unsa wa ja'alnakum shu'uban wa qabailan lita'arafu. There, of course, there are different tribes and races, but inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The superior one in the eyes of Allah is definitely one who is atqakum, muttaqi. So these kinds of things are actually transcending the closeness of our own surroundings. So to reflect on ourselves and see whether we are actually upholding any of these kind of casteist values is something which we have to ponder on, first of all. And within the Muslim community, of course, there are caste-like practices, and definitely to get rid of them is something which we have to do. Second thing which we have to do is understand Indian social reality. And there are thousands of caste organizations. There are caste religious organizations, socially caste organizations, and political caste organizations, thousands, which means caste is still the structural aspect, the functional aspect of Indian society. So to understand this aspect and how caste has evolved, caste is not static at all. It is always evolving, and there are Shudra groups which attained more powerful. They became more dominant in Telangana and Andhra. You will have the Shudra caste, which will have more dominance, and the evolving aspect of caste, which we have to take into consideration and understand the inequalities and discrimination within Indian society, thereby engage with Indian society or the Hindu society. I think that will also facilitate Dawat as well. In 1970s, Meenakshipuram conversion happened, in which a whole village in Tamil Nadu in Meenakshipuram converted to Islam just because they were suffering from the Hindu caste system, and they thought the emancipation is available within Islam. And right now they are saying they actually got rid of caste system, and they are much more free, and Muslims consider them as equals. This doesn't happen all of a sudden. There were some Dawa networks which were working among these caste groups. It also helped them to facilitate the conversion to Islam.
So kindly
So
elaborate this
to
in
facilitate
more
Dawa,
instance.
we have there are a lot of small groups which go for Dawat. Even from Kerala Islamic Mission, which is run by Jamaat Islami, and they have small groups. They will go to different localities in the different areas. When it comes to the utterly discriminated areas in Tamil Nadu and all, it is largely the caste system which is the problematic aspect. And they went there, they talked about Islam, and also definitely that is where the material aspect is also important. The material mobility comes through, it also comes through conversion. Of course, the major aspect is the right to dignity. Dignity is a major aspect, and people simply convert to attain dignity. That is what happened in Malabar. You might be knowing about the Malabar rebellion and Malabar history. Lower caste people converted in thousands and lakhs actually, just to attain dignity, because they were not having dignity within Hindu fold. So Islam gives them dignity. So these aspects of Islam, which we have to think about. What actually interested the companion of Prophet Bilal to Islam, because he was within the clutches of slavery, and Islam actually gave him emancipation, spiritual emancipation as well as physical emancipation as well. This is what should be our treatment towards the oppressed communities in this country, I think. When I think you have another session now with Dais and all. I think you should
Yeah.
detail about these.
We are planning for that in the month of, yeah, obviously.
I personally don't have a first-hand experience.
Okay.
So they might be able to better explain these issues.
Yes. So thank you, Tahir Jamal, for your valuable time and discussing the intricacies of annihilation of caste and giving us an insight about the annihilation of caste. So if there are any other questions, we are open, then we will conclude in more 2 minutes. We will wait for 2 minutes and then we will be concluding. If because there
Yes,
are
there's a question from my end.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So my question is, like, we talk about annihilation of caste and the people who are facing issues with respect to caste, but as soon as if you see the reports of Dalits, especially from Christian community or from minority community, from Hindu community, if they are converting into Islam, the problem is like they'll lose the constitutional guarantees which were provided to them. If we see the provisions which says that special reservations to Dalits, it is applicable only if they are Hindus. So the problem is that if they are losing the one stigma from them of not being able to live a dignified life, and if they are converting into Christianity or Islam, the problem is getting more worse for them. First of all, dignity is an important aspect, but when it comes to the basic essentials, they are being denied about that, be it like giving houses to them or educational status or reservation status. So even though the issue is good, but the problem is getting more worse when they are converting. So how do we challenge this, and how do we help them resolve this?
Yeah.
Considering this limited, this 9 people here in front of me, equipped and well knowledgeable people, I would say that not only me saying, there are people like Ravi Chandran who converted to Islam and become Rais, say that reservation is actually a problem also. It is reservation which
Perpetuates
forced
the caste.
the lower caste people to keep within the fold. It is reservation which keeps the lower caste people within the fold of Hinduism. So that is a critique of reservation as well. And that is how Ravichandran accepted Islam, and he turned down his caste certificate and said, this is actually a problem. And
Yeah.
dignity.
We are expecting him. We are expecting him here to add, just to disturb you. Sorry to disturb you, but we are expecting Ravi Chandar in the month of December.
Okay, great. Yeah. So basically, there are people just like that who thinks reservation is a problem, even though it have whatever benefits which they are saying. And the very conception of dignity is different for them. It is not about you attaining some material benefit or you getting some post, which is dignity, but dignity is something beyond that. You able to raise your head, think freely. That is also what is called dignity. And to this limited audience, I would say that there should be a critique of Ambedkar as well. It doesn't have to be much broader, but at least in one aspect. And that aspect is the issue of nationalism. When it comes to nationalism, Ambedkar have a problem. On the one hand, Ambedkar imagines a nation from the margins. Ambedkar have a brilliant criticism of Indian mainstream nationalism. At the same time, when it comes to foreign and indigenous, there is an issue. Even Ambedkar's preference for Sikhism, even Ambedkar's preference for Buddhism, it all comes from his preference for the indigenous kind of thing and his fear of foreignness. Islam as something foreign, that is always a problem. And I think just keep in mind there is this issue as well. And as Hinduism is also something which is not outside the Indian nation state, it will be a bit difficult to engage with caste from the Muslim kind of vantage point. Yeah. That's.
Thanks, Tarjamal. So shall we conclude? Yeah. Just I would like to give you information like the recent death of murder of Hemant Kumar of Vaishya caste by the forward caste Reddys. This would explain you the intensity of caste issues in Indian society. In the words of Saltumde, the caste is under the carpet of Republic of India. You need an eye to know that. So in Telangana, the recent death of that person, he was killed by his in-laws. Even the Vaishya is also is a forward caste, and the Reddy is also forward caste, but he was killed. So here the caste issue is not just about lower and upper caste, but it's the hierarchy, one above the another, above the another, and each discriminates each. If he is up the ladder, then he will discriminate the one who is lower. But at the same time, he will be discriminated by someone else who is above him. So these are the complexities of caste issue. I hope the session was beneficial for us to understand. At the same time, I request our participants to share this program to those Muslim students who are really interested in this kind of discussion. It is not bounded to the specific audience. Any Muslim student or any Muslim graduate or any university student, Muslim student who is interested. So we welcome him here in the session. So we will meet again on Sunday. The same timing will be there, and the topic will be the same: reading annihilation of caste. Hopefully, we will try to go in much into the details because Tahir Jamal himself has said that he will be dealing in the very peripheral level. He will not go into the details of the discussion. Just his lecture was to make you understand or make you realize why, as a Muslim, you need to read Annihilation of Caste. Even many a time we don't read the literature that is not from a Muslim society or not from a Muslim author, but to bring you all these Indian understanding, to bring all those questions of the questions within the Indian society in which Muslims are not topic of discussion. In Annihilation of Caste, Muslim is not a subject of discussion. It is something else, and that is also most important thing for us to think. If Muslim does not exist, then what will be existing in Indian society or Indian scholarship? And our effort is the same thing. We want to discuss all those things in which Muslims are not in discussion. What goes on in India if Muslims are not? So this is the primary objective of our these lectures. So thank you, Tahir Jamal, once again for your precious time and discussion, all these things. So Allah Hafiz, take care.
Sure.